One of the stories, I tell a lot of stories, and one of the stories I get the most mileage of is actually not technically a Jewish story.
It is.
It is actually a Jewish story. Do you know this one?
It's a redeemed story.
It's a redeemed story?
It works also for Melodi's Rabbi. There's a thing about like redeeming a nigun, sensing with stories. They were all in the Beit HaMikdash, and they spread out. And when we see a story that we love very much, it reminds us of the Beit HaMikdash, and it means that it was there. Does this story remind you of the Beit HaMikdash?
Yes, actually.
Okay, so it is a Jewish story. Go ahead.
So there's a Buddhist monk.
He was a rabbi.
Excuse me, a Buddhist Nazir. And was approached by a student. And the student says to the monk, Master, how is it? Sorry, Rabbi, how is it? Really, is like a textbook appropriate. Okay, anyway. He's approached by the student who says, Master, how is it that you got so wise? He said, well, experience. And the student says, yes, that's good. But hey, how did you get that experience? He says, well, I did a lot of good deeds. The student says, that's right, yeah. But just a second, no, actually, how did you know to do all these good deeds? He said, well, I did a lot of bad deeds. And I think that's a pretty good seg to this week's Parsha, actually. It's called Parshat Yitro. We're in the desert now, if we're sort of situating ourselves. Egypt is receding into the distance, and the Sinai looms ahead. And the moment of truth is coming, and the leader's father-in-law shows up, and he's a goy, which is for Yiddish, for them who don't know, it's a non-Jew. And Yitro is very helpful. He's very talented, and he's full of advice that Moses really needs, and he's warmly welcomed and promptly adopted into the community. When you read it through a universalist lens, right, sort of the taking tradition and expanding it to be as open as possible, the relationship between Yitro and Moses is a radical bond between a Jew and a non-Jew. Right? Moses marries Tzipporah, daughter of Yitro. Yitro is considered a priest of Midian. Moses' children are not technically halachically Jewish. And our paradigmatic communal leader is both in an interfaith marriage and runs his entire shul based on the advice of his father-in-law, who is not only not Jewish, but again, is a priest of another religion. In some synagogues in America still, they debate whether non-Jews can be on the board, but forget that. Yitro is laying the foundation for the entire history of Jews. Okay, so that's option A. Option B, this is far different from how the rabbis take the story, because Yitro is painted in a totally different lens. Yitro is the model convert. According to Rashi, right, there isn't a single idol that Yitro hasn't worshipped. How do we know this? In Exodus 18:11, Yitro says, "Now I know that God is greater than all the other gods." How did he know how to do good deeds? Well, in the Bavli, in our Talmud, Rabbi Eliezer says that Yitro joins the Israelites after hearing the Torah given at Sinai rather than before. This doesn't make sense to me because, the Parsha begins with Yitro and we're not at Sinai yet. And Aviva Zornberg notes that this interpretation assumes this sort of spiritual crisis in Yitro's life that's remedied by Moses proselytizing. She writes, Yitro's identity goes from Yitro, priest of Midian, so you can watch it happen over Exodus, to Yitro, right, Moses' father-in-law. You just read Exodus through and through, and it shifts. She writes, his identity is totally absorbed into a relationship with Moses and the community, and the honor that Yitro left behind is replaced with this new identity. So when Moses brings Aaron and his sons to meet Yitro, Moses is demonstrating respect and sensitivity in this version of it, in our particularist version. So if I focus on the insular of the tribe. Moses is demonstrating respect and sensitivity to one who's permanently abandoned their past. Yitro's supposed conversion is met with admiration, with appreciation. So here's my question for you. Is one interpretation more valid or more true than the other? Does anyone dare attempt to go for it? It's sort of impossible. We know two Jews, it doesn't work, right? Both are rooted in the text, right? The conclusions come about through sort of standard Jewish interpretive methods. And the universalist conclusion is a little more, we call pshat, the surfaced reading. And the particularist is a little bit of rabbinic jujitsu, right? To say, well, we'll align the text with the particularist values. And if we find the particularism objectable, well, we can't really disqualify it because they employed a little bit of creative interpretation. And I have to tell you, who are we progressive Jews if not, masters of contextualizing a text with a little bit of interpretation to make it fit in our context of time and place? What I'm getting at is this, is that in Parshat Yitro this week, Yitro and his experiences and our interpretation, we sort of see that religion becomes quite subjective. It's malleable under the pressure of human interest, and it produces this unavoidable tension among our Jewish community. Because we and our co-religionists hold very strong convictions, a passion for our Jewish identity, and sometimes a certain level of insecurity and fear when our approach is not tolerated by other Jews. Has anyone ever experienced this? Yeah, I see some nods and laughs, okay. There's this 20th century philosopher, Karl Popper, who proposed an idea that he called the paradox of tolerance. I've mentioned it before, but I think it surfaced again in this week, right? Popper's paradox states that societies or religions, whatever, groups of people that wish to be truly tolerant will only succeed if they never tolerate voices that are intolerant of others. Popper's point speaks to what it means to be truly pluralistic and what it means, I think, to hold the fact that some Jews see Yitro as our model convert, and some Jews see Yitro as this Midianite priest hanging out. And that's okay. How we respond to the interpretations and the person who brings them to us reflects actually how tolerant and pluralistic our communities are. We have to toe this fine line between disagreement and dismissal. And so when we hear these disagreeing points from the universalist view of Yitro the priest to the particularist view of Yitro the convert, no matter where we stand, we can't allow people to reject a Jewish viewpoint out of hand. All of it is this. This is really what it boils down to. Reading Yitro, we see so many Jewish interpretations, and even this week, one Midianite interpretation. But if we wish to function as a people, we have to embrace it, say it's ours, even when we say, I don't agree. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.